Check, check, 1, 2. Beauty. There we go, camera's on. Hello, everyone. How's it going? Welcome back to another class. In this case, Advanced Social Journalism. It's good to see at least a couple of you in chat so far. We'll see who else makes their way in. Bear with me 1 second while, as per usual, I turn my music down a bit more than expected. You'd think by now I would just leave it turned down an appropriate amount, but I choose not to, apparently. How's everyone doing? We get through yet another week of isolation, and I always hesitate to use the word quarantine for most of us. Things are slowly reopening, though. I actually, myself, I just the other day went to Curry's Art Supplies in the West End, Hamilton, to pick up some markers I've been meaning to get for, well, a couple months at this point. I grabbed curbside delivery, but I did see people going into the store. I think they told me there's a maximum of 3 people allowed in at any one time. It's very, very interesting seeing what's going on. What have you guys been up to, aside from hopefully working on your blog assignments? I see that a good chunk of you have your assignment done on time. We'll talk about this closer to the end of class. I think I'll be turning a blind eye to any late assignments, or at least anything that happens to show up between now and when I'm done teaching. We'll talk more at the end of class about this. So, while I have, well, at least a few people here, hopefully someone will be able to shout out in chat for me. I'm trying to figure out how long my stream delay is, because ultimately it's not something I can just program in. It's something, there's a whole bunch of different variables to it. So I'm not sure if I'm speaking to you guys on a 5-minute delay or on a 10-second delay. It seems to vary sometimes. Either way, let's get talking about what we're learning today. As well, what's new in the news. So I'm going to switch over to my display. I have a couple of interesting stories pulled for you guys today. The first of which comes right from Hamilton. A few of these do. This one is about a peregrine falcons. And that, within the next couple of weeks, there's an expectation that the peregrine falcon babies that have recently hatched in and around Hamilton in certain monitored nests should be taking flight, by the first week of June. For those who didn't know, in Hamilton we have peregrine falcons. They nest on some of the skyscrapers closer to downtown, and they're monitored very closely by a few different nature authorities here in Hamilton. They're closely monitored just because they're a species we want to continue to promote here in Hamilton. But if you're downtown, try looking up every once in a while. You might actually see one. So I recommend giving this a read. Here's one that hits me a bit more closely, personally. There's a concern that the SoBe bike program may end in Hamilton in the coming few months. This isn't because Hamilton wants to shut down the program. This isn't because of sanitization concerns or COVID concerns directly. It's because ultimately the company that runs the software and the monitoring for SoBe, which is, I believe, Social Bicycles LLC, now known as Jump, that company is pulling out. That company is owned by Uber, and Uber has taken a huge hit during the pandemic because no one's using its services. So apparently the money's not there for Uber, so they're trying to back out. This is after they just recently signed on an extra months contract. 1 year contract extension that wouldn't have ended until February of next year. Uber, or Social Bikes LLC, is trying to back out of this. And Hamilton's currently trying to figure out what they can do with this company, and also figure out whether they can just keep the bike system going on their own, because at the end of the day, all the bike racks and all the bikes are owned by the city. They were paid for with a grant from, who was it? It is written in the article. I think it's a Metrolinx grant. I don't see it immediately here, but I believe it was Metrolinx who paid for the original purchase. This hits me personally just because until very recently had a SoBe membership, and I use the bikes quite often. They're a really good way to get around downtown if you're without a car. It's also just a fun way to kind of spend an afternoon. You rent out a SoBe bike and you take a bike ride down to Bayfront, or you take a bike ride out to Ottawa Street. It's a bit of exercise, a bit of fun. So with that, I'm curious to see what comes of this story. We have one more story from Hamilton. Then I'm turning to world news. So one retirement home in Hamilton, the Roslyn Retirement Residence, recently had to essentially evacuate all its residents because a outbreak of COVID-19 within the residence was too much to handle. So they were all moved to hospital. This was kind of a joint effort between the city, police, EMTs, the residence itself. In the process of moving all these people, one man was just left behind. And this wasn't just your average resident just chilling. This man was one of the people who were sick with COVID-19. He was just forgotten. There's not much to say about it. There's plenty to say about it, but there's not much opinion to give on it. There's a question of who's liable. Ultimately, one of the main reasons that this happened was there was no actual list of residents for this retirement community. Essentially, they didn't feel it necessary to take attendance. The only reason this man was found, aside from the family repeatedly calling the powers that be at the residence saying our family member's not in hospital, and hearing back, well, no, they definitely got moved to hospital. After a bunch of complaining there, the actual owner and one security staff who happened to be on site managed to find this man. It's, I don't even know where to begin. Like, it's outrageous that something like this happens. I was discussing this with my own parents recently, and they were saying that it really firms up that they don't want to be put in a home, what with everything going on. It's curious. There's a lot of oversight that seems to be missed here in Quebec, in other provinces. It's worth looking into. And these are the kind of stories that journalists dig for. This is an outlier, but there's a reason watchdog journalists keep an eye on retirement homes, is because there's a lot of neglect that goes on there. And without that journalism bringing it to light, people would be none the wiser. So let's talk a bit more broadly. Let's talk a bit of world news. First of all, we have a cyclone that has hit India and Bangladesh. Cyclone Amphan, I believe. This cyclone, which is the equivalent of a Category 3 hurricane or so, winds up to 170 kilometers with gusts to 190. Warnings that seawater could be pushed as far as 25 kilometers inland, flooding different cities. Ultimately, this major cyclone is causing people to evacuate. In Bangladesh, for example, we have 2.4 million people were evacuated from their homes. These people now have to face finding shelter, finding places to feel safe and secure during a pandemic. This is what makes this particular story interesting to me, is that it's two crises at once, and there's considerations to be made here. People are afraid to take shelter with other people, because that could be as dangerous as sheltering alone during, again, a cyclone, essentially a hurricane. I highly recommend looking at this story. It's pretty in-depth, and digging further into this, because at the end of the day, India and Bangladesh counts for COVID are pretty high. One of the cities impacted that's been flooded, for example, what was the name of the city? Kolkata, for example, has 1,500 cases of COVID-19. And so all of these people now have to scatter. They can't just shelter at home. They can't just quarantine in their homes. I'm curious to see what happens. One last bit of news. Climate change news is always interesting, right? Very often we feel we've heard the end of it, in that nothing can surprise us. The crises, the weather events, all of it's slowly becoming kind of a norm for us, which is very upsetting to me. Here's one that caught me off guard, and this is why I shared it. Climate change is turning the snow in Antarctica green. This to me is very bizarre and very, very interesting. There. Yeah, we have essentially blooms of algae are because of the warmer weather, the warmer climate, and the water runoff. Algae is blooming, and with that, the snow is turning green. Dyed by the chlorophyll. Yes. Of the algae. This is very curious and a very interesting way to show that things are not normal. May never be, but worth looking at. Well, I'm here. Does anyone else have any other news before we get into our actual lesson? Any other stories you've picked up? There's definitely a lot going on. I certainly have people in chat, so feel free to shout out any stories, anything interesting to you. I'm going to get started. Again, don't feel like you're interrupting by joining in chat. I'll get to it when I have a natural pause. One thing I want you guys, my students from Mohawk, to keep in mind for this class is that before I get into this, on Canvas, we have a couple of resources for you. So aside from the actual resources tab and the news tab, you're going to see one file called Photos to Analyze. I would like you to open this, to download this. It's literally 5 photos in a Word document. I want you to take a look at them because ultimately I'd like you guys to have some opinions and some thoughts on these photos before we get to them in class. So hopefully we can do a quick analysis. It's not mandatory, but I do encourage it. Communication's pretty key in this kind of thing. So with that, why photos? Well, today we're talking about photos and photojournalism. There we go. So last class we talked about how to build a Wix blog, the actual structure of building one. We talked about letting Wix build our blogs automatically if need be. We also moved on to customizing templates to make a blog's design our own, which is more what I dealt with because having Wix build it for you is pretty straightforward. I also assigned the first of the 4 blog assignments. If you haven't handed it in, it was due 14 minutes ago. Please get it in as soon as possible. Like seriously. Beyond that. Today we're going to talk about the power of photos. Why photos matter. As someone who loves to shoot photos, it's a topic I very much enjoy discussing. We'll then move on to talking about photojournalism to some degree. And again, do a short photo analysis. If you didn't download the photos, I will have them popping up on here, but because of the stream delay, again, I don't know exactly how long it is, I'd rather make sure you guys have access to the photos long before you need to actually start talking about them. Then we'll talk about photos for blogs and how to treat photos differently depending on the blog you're doing. So let's get to it. First, please just shout out an answer to this whenever you get a chance. Again, I don't know the delay. What makes for a good photo? What's the best photo you ever shot? And what do you like about it? Again, please feel free to comment because I'm actually going to pull up my own. So I have a couple of photos. The big one for me. Anyone who's tuned into my other class last week knows that this is one of my favorite photos I've ever shot. And there's a few reasons for this. A, the photo's just nice and pretty. A lot of color pulled out of it. A very scenic shot of Bayfront. I forget. Yeah, Bayfront. But most of the reason I really like this photo is not in the edit. It's not in the composition. It's in the amount of work it took to actively think to shoot this photo. It took myself and my friend going down to Bayfront with tripods, which is not something I usually take out when I'm shooting random photos. We wanted to shoot long exposures just for the fun of it. So we were just kind of running around at dusk trying to get as many awesome photos as we could before the sun went down and we lost all our light. Beyond that, because it's such a slow exposure, that really defines how the photo looks. Like the water looks smooth like a piece of glass. All the smoothness and contrast in the clouds because I shot at a long exposure. Because of the edits I threw in, we get color in even the simplest things like these rocks and gravel. Again, one of my favorite photos. Another. The orb one beside it's really cool, and my coffee house one beside that's really cool. All long exposures. The one that I always loved was this photo I shot of my cat, Juno. And a lot of people, like, everyone has a shot of their pets. That's not what makes this cool. The fact that my cat is a cat is not the most amazing thing in the world, aside from she's quite cute. What I liked about this photo was the amount of time I took to make sure that all the little details were nice and clear, nice and crisp. I probably shot 30 different angles while my cat was chilling out on the couch. Every tiny detail you could think of I tried to address, like even fluff on the couch I got rid of. And that passion that I threw into the edit was what made this photo so appealing to me. But yeah, I've shot... God, there's so many photos I've shot that I like. And I'm not trying to show off the quality of my photos. That's not my point. My point is that that every photo has a story behind it. Every photo has a purpose behind it. Every photo has those factors that led up to it existing. Some of my favorite photos are of days where I just hung out with my friends and shot a random photo. So yeah, feel free to shout out and chat what your favorite photo, the best photo you've ever taken is. I'm more than happy to talk about it. Moving on though. Let's talk about the power of photos. I threw a quote in. I'm not always one for quotes, but there are always two people in every picture, the photographer and the viewer. This quote is from Ansel Adams, a very famous landscape photographer from a while ago. So what are photos? Photos were invented to capture a moment in time. It's taking one image or one idea and throwing it onto a piece of film or through a sensor and interpreting it into data. At one time, to be a photographer, to take a photo meant this whole long process of different skills. You had to understand the physics of light. You had to understand the artistry of composition, the chemistry of developing film, or God forbid, developing lithographs, or anything like that. You had to have people skills, and you still do. You have to be able to talk to your subject. You have to be able to approach people. Or, alternatively, you have to have the guts to just shoot random photos of people and roll with the punches, is the best way to put that. At this point now, we're really able to take photos at any time. We don't need to necessarily have all these refined skills to shoot a quick photo. So talking about that, there are a lot of people who take shots of their own lives without stopping to take a photo, or at least that's the way I'd put it. They don't stop and think about the composition of a photo. They often don't even think about what they're shooting a photo of. I'm not even going to start ragging on selfies. That's its own thing. But the best example I can think of is people shooting videos at concerts. These are examples of things that we shoot and never look at again. Someone two balconies back whipping out their phone to shoot tiny little people on a tiny stage. It looks terrible. The sound's awful. You're so busy focusing on your phone that you do really miss out on the experience, at least from my personal experience. And no one gives a damn after. No one is like, except maybe the night you come home to say like, yeah, I just saw this concert. No one will ever care about the video you shot of a concert on your smartphone from the second balcony. They just won't, and you won't. Think how many photos on your phone were shot and never looked at again. I've got a bunch. You shot them, maybe you shared them, and then after that little process, never looked at ever again. Those are what I'm calling shots. It's not that there's no value to them, but from an artistic or sometimes even a content perspective, these shots are just blips in time. But that's not everything is bad about being able to... Oh, my phone's in my pocket. Not everything is bad about being able to whip out your phone and just shoot photos. Because at the end of the day, having a phone means that I can take a photo, you can take a photo. The examples I chose, a disgruntled citizen in Libya can take a photo. A bit of a throwback to the Arab Spring, where pretty much every country in Northern Africa and the Middle East started protesting, and a lot of this came together through things like social media and the sharing of what was going on. Protesters in Hong Kong can take a photo. Lord knows, y'all must have seen at least a photo. You must have heard of the protests in Hong Kong. And the way you hear about that is either journalists have an in and they figure out that story just as it's happening, or like Hong Kong, which has been going on for months, or had been going on for months and months, it's the people themselves on the ground who are sharing their experience. At the end of the day, because of this, anyone, or practically anyone, can take a photo and share their experience, good or bad. And that's... I wrote that it's incredibly important. It's borderline magical. People 200 years ago would never have thought that possible. Never mind the million other things that are borderline magical in that regard. But the fact that I can see someone's anger, sorrow, happiness, joy, their favorite baked good, the fact that they're learning to draw on the other side of the planet is amazing. So no, taking quick photos, having a phone is not a bad thing. I'm not about to say if you want to take a photo, get a DSLR camera, a mirrorless camera, and invest all this time and skill. There are ways we make our photos better, but at the end of the day, photos are about content, and we'll talk about this. With photography, we have created citizen watchdogs, and those people can share their experiences and share what they see in an easier way than writing it in a pamphlet. This used to be a skill for people with the right gear, the right education, and to be honest, for posh white dudes all over the world. Now, not only can anyone take a photo, anyone can train to be a photographer. Anyone can learn to be a photojournalist. There's an account I follow on Twitch here that's a photojournalist. Most of the time when I do tune in, he's just chilling, he's just chatting, but his work is in photojournalism, and photojournalism is amazing work. Some argue that the ability for people to share this information in such an easy way all over the world is the modern equivalent of the development of the printing press in Europe. Suddenly everyone could learn to read and write. In this way, suddenly everyone can show their experience. Just in this case through a photo instead of writing. The internet's also a very important invention, and I'll never discredit that one either, but... So, a thing to keep in mind. I'm going to get my big head out of here for a moment. This is my own writing. This is my own perspective on this kind of thing, and I do encourage you to really think about this. Above all other things, photography is about content. A photo without a subject, context, or information is useless. At least from my perspective. Artistic beauty is important, but every photo should be able to say something. That's the difference between a photo and a quick shot that I was talking about. A truly great photo pulls in the audience member. It creates a little world inhabited only by the viewer, the photographer, and the subject. It creates a broad conversation. It gives you something to discuss and think about. And just like good artwork arguably makes the viewer think, good photography does too. So, moving on. Let's talk about photojournalism. If we're talking about content, photojournalism is the epitome of prioritizing content in a photo. Photographers make it their business to master fundamental rules of composition, light, emotion. They create beautiful photos using these things. But beyond the standard rules of photography, photojournalists have a lot of extra work they have to do to accomplish their job. Not only do photojournalists' photos need to look good, but they need to tell a story. You could have a really crappy looking photo, and if it tells the story, and it's a compelling story that it's telling, we can overlook all sorts of flaws in the artistic direction of a photojournalist's photo. It really boils down to the content. A good journalistic photo will say just as much as a good headline or a good lead, like the first few sentences of an article. In fact, there are some photos that tell such a big story that you literally just have the photo and a caption, which are a few that we're going to look at today. So, for photojournalistic perspectives, there are some ideas that are super easy to capture. Your who, what, when, where, your subject, your action, your location, your time. They're not easy things to physically capture with a camera. You need to understand how to do this, but the ideas are simple. The subject, whoever's doing the thing. The action, whatever they're doing. If someone's, I don't know, if we're talking soccer, let's get away from conflict. If we're talking soccer, capture action by getting a shot of them just as they kick the ball, right? Location, easy enough. Soccer pitch, you could get a wider shot. You could even write in a caption where you are. Same with when. Sometimes those aren't super important. But at the end of the day, a really good photo will give you context. They'll show you what makes this specific kick, this specific soccer game, this specific team so important to have taken this photo. And at the end of the day, if you don't want to become a photographer, because this class doesn't necessarily apply to everyone, our job as a journalist, which I do hope you want to become, is to work with photojournalists. If you're not going to be one yourself, you need to be able to work with one. Because we can combine our writing with their photos. We can make both of our jobs come together to make a way more compelling story. And at the end of the day, we need to understand the story, but the specific context of the photo as well. So let's talk about analyzing photos. Someone do me a favor and shout out in chat that you guys exist and are watching this. Because currently I just see a chat list and no comments, which is fair. But just want to make sure that we're good to go. Okay, cool. Beauty. And since the hello popped up pretty quickly, I'm going to assume the delay is not too terrible. I exist and I am watching this. Good. So let's start talking about photos. And I do really, really encourage you guys to look at these photos and think about them. I exist and have been watching. Good. So I give you guys 5 photos. This is one of them. Bear with me for a second because I'm also pulling up captions. There we go. Let's get that out of the way. And then let's minimize this guy. There we go. So let's start with this photo. Um, dichotomy. Okay, here. This, I want something from someone on this one. This photo has so much going on as far as emotional value and content. What's happening here? What's this person feel? And while I'm waiting for answers, this is one of those photos where the composition of the photo is not the most amazing composition. The lighting's okay. There's no rule of thirds, no leading lines or anything like that. But the content, the emotion, the expression is super compelling. Looks like he almost drowned in a lake, hydrated from the learning egg. Come on, someone give me one more. What's this guy feeling? What's going on? What are we supposed to feel looking at this photo? Pain or relief? Honestly, pain or relief really hits the nail on the head. This photo from Amber Bracken. This photo from Amber Bracken is this post a pepper spray photo. A protester is treated after being sprayed with pepper spray at a police blockade on Highway 1806. The further caption. The Dakota Access Pipeline is a 1,886 kilometer long underground oil pipeline project designed to transport oil from North Dakota to a shipping terminal in Illinois, USA. By 2016, most of the pipeline was complete, but the section closest to the Standing Rock Sioux Reservation still awaited federal approval. This man is one of the protesters of the pipeline going through Sioux territory. And yes, he'd been pepper sprayed. So he's, well, pain or relief. He's in immense pain, and he's also getting relief because they're washing it off of him. So absolutely spot on. But again, this is one of those photos where our composition is not the most thrilling, but our emotion is what draws us in. It's that moment in time that no other person saw. Like, there's a very good chance that the only people who experience this moment are the person helping the man and the man who's being helped. And this photojournalist managed to get in there and capture that so we can see this. That's a really powerful tool to have in your hands. How are we feeling here? Standing Rock, yeah, it was. It is a tad delayed, yes. So anyone else, how are we feeling with this photo here? There. So I'll start. This is one of those photos where we have our emotion, we have our content, and we have composition as well. This isn't one of those things that's happening, in an instant, and we need to capture it. This photojournalist took their time, and yeah, in theory, they're respecting how this person feels, which is, yes, as was said, pain and sadness is a really good way to put this. Like, there's pain and sadness, and then that whole innocence thing as well. This child here, who I will say is 2 years old, in the condition they're in is, well, it's upsetting. Not a lot of photojournalism is a bummer. It's a really good way to like devalue it. It's upsetting. It's depressing. There have been photojournalists who, some have been pushed too far by their work, and what they've had to see. So this photo, by Paula Bronstein or Bronstein. Najiba holds her nephew Sabir, 2 years old, who was injured in a bomb blast that killed his sister in Kabul, Afghanistan in March. The bomb exploded in a relatively peaceful part of Kabul while Sabir's mother was taking the children to school. So for the record, the sister is Najiba's sister, not Sabir's sister. So he's very clearly injured, and she's both has to care for him and mourn the loss of her own sister. This is one of those moments that, again, these these quiet moments that no one else in the world would have seen were a photojournalist not there. Let's move on. We got one more. So we have some sad photos, some pain. Let's throw in some happiness. Please give me something besides the word happiness. What are they feeling? This is actually a very, very cool photo once it's contextualized. Cool and sad in its own kind of way, but looks like a bumping car ride to McDonald's. Honestly, it does. Well, against social distancing, I can tell you that this photo was taken some time ago. I believe 2019, maybe 2018. So this photo, bumping car ride to McDonald's, that vibe is definitely a thing in this photo. This photo, the title, by Tasneem Al-Sultan, Saudi women are allowed to drive for the first time in more than half a century. The further caption. In June, I believe again of 2018, Saudi women took to the streets to drive cars legally for the first time since 1957 for more than half a century under a strict policy, only one of its kind in the world, that disallowed female motorists. Women in Saudi Arabia had to rely on men to drive. There's more information here. Ultimately, this came down as part of a program to get women to engage more in the workforce, and so they need to be able to drive to work. But these are women. Well, none of them were around in 1956. That's for sure. These are women who are for the first time holding a steering wheel, knowing that they can legally use it, and obviously the laws behind all that, like, there's all sorts of issues there, with misogyny and all of that. But look, their enthusiasm, and what's probably a giggle fit, just talking about what they can do, just knowing the little bit of liberation they have from this changed law. Again, there are bigger social contexts behind this that are terrible, but in this moment, that's not something they're thinking about. And again, I'll never stop saying it. This is one of those moments where the photojournalists could have left it. Could have shown a photo of the politicians signing the bill that allows women to drive in Saudi Arabia. But no, we have a photo of the women sitting in the car and giggling and laughing. And that moment is there because a photojournalist stepped in and said, I'm going to take that photo. I'm going to capture that moment. So what I'm going to do, I'll do it right now just to make it easier. I'm actually opening up the photo captions now on Canvas so that you can access them if you so wish. And we're going to move on. Thank you for actually participating in the chat as well. So I want to talk, now that we've talked about context and the idea of building context and finding those moments, our blogs are not necessarily blogs that are going to be filled with those key moments in the world that no one else would see. It's not the point of our blog. I'm talking about sports in my blog. I'm talking about baking in my blog. I'm not trying to show, I'm not trying to capture the emotion of me making my first sourdough starter. If I can, that's cool, but it's not mandatory. So what considerations do we need to make in blogs when it comes to our photos? That said, if your blog is about photojournalism, go ham. Like, you do you. If you want to be a photojournalist, absolutely, I highly recommend learning further photography or taking journalism, either one. So, different blogs need different types of visuals. A music blog might rely on photos of new albums, photos from live shows. A baking blog, like I mentioned, might be more carefully composed photos of desserts. A really nice overhead shot of all the ingredients for a recipe. A financial blog doesn't really need photos of much. It relies more on charts and graphs of data. If you're a social activist and have a blog on that, you'll visualize data in a lot of ways to justify the social activism. But you might also be shooting photos of protests. You might also be shooting photos of the people you're trying to fight for. A good example of this is Jesse Golem, a Hamiltonian and acquaintance of mine. I would not say friend. We've run into each other a couple of times. She started a photo series with Hamilton's Basic Income Pilot Project when it was canceled. Well, just before it was canceled. She did a photo series of just taking photos of different people who were receiving basic income, holding a sign that they wrote explaining how basic income affected their lives. And she used that entire series in its own way as her brand of social activism. So your blog may have something like that. It may have these carefully composed, these planned shots. It may have spur-of-the-moment protest photos. It may have data visualization. If you do a news blog, you're going to have a bit of everything. 'Cause that's news. News is just everything. So again, the point is that different blogs approach photos different ways. I'm going to talk about a few of these and give you a few tips. So, if your blog needs run and gun photos, shooting photos as you come up with the content in the heat of the moment. Again, I'm using going to a live show to shoot photos for your music blog. You have a limited window to get enough photos. The band you're talking about may be on for a quick half-hour set, so you need to get all the photos you need in that half hour. As a rule of thumb, when you're not taking notes, when you're not writing, when you're not sitting down with the bands, interviewing them, or whatever, you should be shooting photos. These photos, when they are shot well, feel really in the moment. They help prove you were there and build your credibility as the blogger or journalist you are. You can say, not only was I there because of all these things I've written about this show, you can just say, and I got this awesome photo, and use that as your cover photo. So when we're talking about run and gun, which tends to be more my style of photography, you need to be quick. You need to shoot lots of photos. People, like purists, will talk to you about your ratio of like how many photos you shoot to how many photos you keep. Don't worry about it. Just shoot photos, try to find the good ones. I have one show I shot. If I could pull it up quickly, I would. I think I shot 1,200 photos of 2 bands, 3 bands, and a video. having a camera that just shoots them all quickly is really nice. The big thing here is a lot of this is about confidence. It's about the confidence to say, hey, I'm here as a journalist. I want to shoot photos of the event. Hey, I want to promote, like, not only shoot photos, but I'm going to be talking about your event, and that'll be some promotion for you. Talk your way into a better camera angle. If someone's blocking the stage, worm your way in there. If you know the band you want to talk with is in the back room and there's someone in the way, just explain who you are. Be confident, talk your way into it. Don't break any laws, or I can't condone you breaking any laws to get the good photo. But there's a lot to be said for just pulling out an ID, especially if you're doing the Mohawk thing. Pull out your student card, say, I'm a student with Mohawk for the journalism program. I was covering the event. I was hoping I could maybe talk to the band real quick. 9 out of 10 times, they don't give enough of a care to stop you. The band may not want to talk, and that's its own thing. But on that subject, talk to people ahead of time. If you know you're going to... I almost said this in Hollywood. That's not a thing anymore. If you know you're covering a show at the Doors pub or at Absinthe, reach out to them ahead of time. Email them. Find who you need to talk to. Go down to the pub ahead of time and talk to someone. The more people know your face, A, the more recognition you get. A, the better credibility you build with B, the better credibility you build with people. But also, just it's a good way to network and get to know people. They saw you at that one show. They have your email address. Maybe they'll let you know about the next show. Or some really cool band that's coming in that never ever shows up in Hamilton. Who knows? When you're at a show, when you're at an event where you have to run and gun, don't settle for a bad or a blocked view. If you're covering a sports event and your seat is way up in the nosebleeds, the Doors is easy. You can just walk in the back room if you want. Yeah. Honestly, most venues worth going to in Hamilton are pretty casual about this kind of thing. It's only like the crappy nightclubs that are like, whoa, you need to prove yourself. You need to have so many followers. You need to look cool enough. What was I saying? Oh, if you're covering a sporting event and you need run and gun photos, if your view is blocked or you're up in the nosebleeds, walk down to the balcony. There's a good chance no one's going to stop you. And the rule of thumb is that one thing I was taught was when shooting photos, for example, well, as a journalist, if you're in a public space, like truly public space, like on the street, you can shoot a photo of anyone. There's no rules. There's no laws saying like you can't show someone's image. They might get angry at you. That's its own thing. If you're in a private space, technically you need true permission from them to shoot photos the moment you start shooting. That said, if you start shooting and they tell you to stop, you can keep every photo you shot before you were told to stop. They're all fine. So for example, if you were shooting at Jackson Square and you were just shooting photos of random people and then security guard comes up to you and says you can't do that, listen to the security guard. But keep all the photos you shot before, that's fine. That's the rule of thumb. Let's get back to the list. I keep getting distracted because I like photos. Look everywhere for new photo ideas. Think about those angles that no one else can get. If I'm talking about a show, see if you can get up the steps of the stage. There was a venue in St. Kitts when I lived out there called Detour, and there's an upper balcony. And I just had to, again, talk my way up to the upper balcony. No one else was up there. I was just shooting shots down at the band I was shooting. That's an angle that even someone who went to the show didn't get. They didn't see that angle. So try to think of ideas that no one else might think of. Try to take shots no one else is thinking of. And as far as new photo ideas, if you're covering an event, don't just shoot photos of the band. Shoot photos of the people in the crowd. Shoot photos of the food or drink that's served. It really depends on the event. Try to get behind the scenes photos when you can. Again, getting into that green room is always a great thing. Or if you know the band, again, I'm sticking with the band thing just because this is what I usually shoot. If you know the band, talk to them. See what kind of things they're doing outside of this. One of my favorite shots I shot of my friend's band. I'm making fun of Darby. Rest in peace. One of my favorite shots I shot of the band was not of them playing. It was of them getting burritos after their set was done. I was just like, hey guys, like I just moshed, I just shot photos, I'm exhausted. I know you guys are too, want to grab a quick burrito. And just watching like a good shot of them all sat around the table is a really cool way to show not so much what the event's like, but to show what the band is like. Right? I hope this is tracking. I hope this is making sense. Invest in a starter DSLR. And I said before, I'm not going to tell you to like get a really high quality camera. This is a half decent camera too. DSLRs have a few benefits that, or like good cameras have a few benefits that your phone doesn't. A, you can shoot better photos on a DSLR. Requires a bit of know-how, but B, people take you seriously. Because I'm not going to lie, if I go up to a band and say, hey guys, I want to shoot some photos of you on my smartphone, I look more like a random fan than I do a journalist, right? It's like a rule of thumb, if you have a tripod for your camera, people take you more seriously for some reason. Even though tripods can cost like $50. Finally, don't let taking photos distract you from the rest of your job. Don't go into, again, let's say a show. Don't go into a show, shoot 2,000 photos, and then be like, okay, I barely remember the band's name. I don't know what set they played. I don't even really know what they sounded like because I was busy focusing on my camera. As someone with ADD, it's not the easiest thing to do to like keep from being distracted. But it's very important if you're blogging especially because you need to know more than just here's some photos. So that's run and gun. If you have more questions, feel free to shout out. Careful composition photos are usually required for blogs where you're discussing a specific item. The examples I pulled are food blogs. All the time they do this. Or tech blogs. If I'm talking about a specific piece of hardware. Sorry, I have the hiccups. These photos are really good for establishing the topic you're discussing. You get a really eye-catching photo, use it as your main photo, and there you go. You don't even have to write it. They know that this cupcake is what you're going to be talking about. These photos do take a fair bit of time. You only get a few of them, but they take time to compose. And it takes a lot of care to properly shoot them. When done right, they tend to feel professional, bright, refined, classy. They also feel kind of stocky, but yeah. So here are some tips on this. This is, again, good if you're doing a food blog, good if you're doing a, even if you're not doing a blog that's like this, if you're doing a post, like let's say you're doing a blog on baseball. Most of your posts might show a specific player, a specific game. I don't know enough about baseball to come up with other photo ideas. But then you have one blog post within your blog that isn't super specific. It's more generally about why you love the game, baseball. And that might be you went out to a park, put a nice baseball down in the grass, and shot a beautifully composed photo of it. Each blog doesn't necessarily call for specific photos. It's more your posts call for specific photos. So here are some rules for careful composition. Again, I'm getting distracted. If you think you're close to the subject, get closer. 9 times out of 10, like, people shoot from way too far away, get nice and close. All else fails, like if you're really worried, okay, this photo is a bit too close, shoot the super close one, back up a foot and shoot again after that. Make sure you get the close up and make sure it's in focus. In this, lighting is everything. This is one where you honestly can shoot all of your photos on a smartphone for the most part, whereas run and gun tends to be more DSLR. But lighting is key. Invest in some small LED lights, or get really good at making use of natural light. Get used to how light works. This is that physics I was talking about for original photographers. At the end of the day, you want to find the best details of your subject and really, really highlight them. If it's a cupcake, you want to make sure that frosting texture is beautiful. You want to make sure the crumb on the highlights of your cupcake are nice and detailed. You want to make sure that there's no extra batter poured over onto your cupcake liner. Even the sprinkles in the foreground, you want to be very careful about where they're placed. Like, everything matters in this photo because this photo is so much about what's in frame. There's no greater context to know. It's literally just, this is a photo of a beautiful cupcake, so it better be a beautiful cupcake. Show depth in your photo by throwing something in the background. I'll quick go back. The best way to show depth in this photo is we make sure our background's nice and neutral. Then we throw, I don't even know, I could say that's a purse. I have no clue what that is, but we throw something in the background, something slightly further up, another cupcake in this case. And then we have our main one all in focus. The key here is making sure everything else is out of focus, which you can do in shooting, or you can do it with editing software, many of which are free, at least to do something like that. So remember that you only need one good photo. Like, go for 5, but make sure you get the one. And once you've shot the one, shoot 2 more that are like, yeah, that's pretty close. Then you're done. Don't spend 10 hours doing this if you get your great photo in the first one. Also, if it takes you 10 hours, rethink your shot. Yeah. And at the end of the day, you're going to do most of the work in the edit. You're going to download... God, I don't even know the free editing programs anymore. Honestly, there's a million of them. A lot of them are apps. You download the editing program on your phone. You use it for basic edits. You ignore the fact that you would have to pay for like special weird AR backgrounds and stuff. And that's about it. Or I will say, if you attend most of the creative media programs at Mohawk, you have access to Adobe Photoshop and Illustrator and all that wonderful stuff. Shameless plug for Mohawk. Not that shameless. I'm a teacher for Mohawk. What do you expect? Visualizations. Visualizations don't really require photos. What they require is data. Blogs that run off of data-driven content, or posts that are really about data-driven subjects, really require that we show data in a simple way. We'll make use of charts, graphs, timelines, maps. I'll actually be teaching you some of these next week or the week after. In the next 2 weeks, I'll be teaching you a couple of these. Sometimes some visualizations are good enough to replace entire paragraphs of writing. Some people make infographics that literally all you need is the infographic. Much like a really good photojournalistic photo, a really good informative infographic sometimes just needs that and maybe a small caption. So let's go with some tips. We'll talk about this visualizations a little bit more when we look at those again in the next 2 weeks. Keep your design simple. Like, make sure you've got your framework and then make it look pretty if you so wish. Keep your design consistent within the post. If your post If your first chart is gray and red, don't make your next one orange and purple, unless there's a really intentional point for that. Some people keep their designs consistent across the entire blog. They only use 2, 3, maybe 4 colors, or other stylistic things. Make use of free tools like Canva. I highly recommend Canva for making basic visualizations. Super easy to use. I showed it to you guys already. You can use it on your phone. You can use it on a computer. Make sure to always ask yourself, how can I make this clearer? How can I make this data simpler? Will they be confused by anything? Will they have any questions about anything? If the answer is yes to any of that, then you need to keep working. Don't double, don't triple, quadruple check your math. If your blog relies on you giving good data, don't screw the data up. Make sure the math is right. It's a really easy one to overlook. Treat your math in visualizations the same way your teachers want you to treat spelling and grammar in your writing. Or the same way some of you treat the spelling and grammar in your writing. I'm not going to call anyone out too much. Your goal is to make these things accurate, informative, and attractive in that order. You want to make sure it's accurate, then you want to make sure it informs some point, then you want to make sure it looks nice. And bonus points if you can do it quickly. If you can make a visualization in, like, depending how simple or complex it is, anywhere from 15 minutes to an hour, you have a knack for this kind of thing, and keep practicing it because you can actually get a job doing this kind of thing. Don't get too bogged down in the minutia. Make your point about one specific thing. Don't worry about the 16 different factors that go into it. Make it about the specific thing. Write about the factors in your writing. That doesn't make sense unless you're actually doing data-driven content, but hopefully if you do, it'll start to make sense. So, stock photos. I had to figure out what the strangest stock photo I could get that was copyright free was, and this, I got a lemur playing a trumpet. Right now, for you guys, if you don't own a camera, if you're just getting familiar with using a smartphone, if you're you don't necessarily understand how to get your lighting quite perfect for a composed photo, right now stock photos are your best friend. They suit most purposes. They don't really suit visualizations, right? But no matter what your blog, stock photos can find a home there. Not all the time, but they can be useful. There are a whole bunch of free options, which I've given to you guys as a list of resources in this PowerPoint and on Canvas. They take no time at all to implement into a blog. Most options, you just download it, you throw it in your blog, you're good. The only big downside is they tend to be generic. If you want a photo of the specific cupcake you're making, you're probably out of luck. If you're trying to take a photo or get a photo of the specific band that you're covering, you're out of luck. If you're just trying to get a generic photo of, a tray of cookies, cool. If you're trying to get a photo of a stack of amps next to a stage and you see like the feet of a rock band but you don't know what band it is, cool. That's where stock photos shine. And some of these are more useful than others. We'll talk about that in a moment. The only other thing to keep in mind, it's really easy to break copyright law with stock photos. I implore you, double check your licenses. Every stock photo site will say you can use this, but you have to attribute it. You can use this without attribution. You have to pay for a license for this. Don't use those. Not right now. I implore you to be careful about that. I don't want you stealing photos. Like, seriously, I don't want you stealing photos. Because just because it's called copyright and not theft doesn't mean it's not theft. Speaking as someone who shoots photos. So stock photo tips, there's not really many tips I can give you because they're stock photos. But I gave you a short list of stock image sites to use. Again, make sure to attribute if the license requires it, and don't pay for a stock photo. If it asks you to pay for it, find a different photo. So I'm not going to pull these guys up right now, but there's Pixabay, which is kind of my go-to. Pixabay is a little bit more business driven, but you can find some really good stuff there, and they've got a pretty good variety. Unsplash also has a really good database that they curate pretty carefully. Pexels and Stock Vault, smaller, but they have kind of more niche stuff. The only one that's truly different, that's truly weird, is Gratisography. Prides itself on having weird stock photos that don't feel stock photo-y. If you're looking for kind of stranger stuff, I highly recommend there. It's not the biggest list, but it's some interesting photos for sure. Now, and again, if you're not super confident in your photos, I highly encourage you to try shooting photos. Maybe they'll turn out great, maybe not so much. At least you're getting practice. Failure is a far better teacher than I could ever be. All else fails, use stock photos, at least for now. So in summary, photos capture a moment in time. That's the entire point a photo exists. And if we're careful about it, that moment can be really powerful. If we take our time to make sure that the intention behind our photo, both in content and in artistic value, is there, photos tend to turn out well. Don't just shoot shots, take photos. In the case of blogs, we have different photo needs for different blogs and different kinds of blog posts. Again, I give you guys tips on that. I recommend shooting your own photos, but stock photos are pretty rad. Pretty useful. So let's talk about this second blog assignment. Let's back out of that. So first of all, before we talk about the next blog assignment, so the first part of the blog assignment was due today at the beginning of class. Give me a quick moment. Let me just see where we stand on this. So I am missing six blog posts as it currently stands. Or 6 first blog assignments as it currently stands. What I'm going to do is I'm going to extend the due date for part 1 until the end of day. You have until the end of day, so until 11:59 p.m. to get me your first part of your assignment, which is super easy. It's literally, I think, 6 sentences and a link to your blog. So you have until the end of the day to either get me that or send me an email explaining why it's going to take longer. The next assignment, the first blog post, which we're about to talk about, is due at the beginning of class. It is super key you guys meet these deadlines, because at the end of the day, if you're going to write, if you're going to be a journalist, whether you're writing articles or blog posts, if you're going to be a photographer, you need to meet your deadlines. That said, if you're having issues, if there's technology issues, if there's mental health, family issues, I really don't care what your issue. If you have issues, let me know. But you need to meet the deadlines otherwise. Yes, I did get yours. Yeah, honestly, I think most of the people in this list or in chat at the moment have actually handed in their assignments, but I need to say it. Let's talk about the second part of this assignment, which is where we start to get into the cooler stuff. So for this part, you're writing your first post on your blogs, on your Wix blogs. I expect you to make some sort of create some sort of post. The content and subject matter is up to you. My advice here is try to leave a piece of yourself on the post. Make it about connecting with your reader. Specifically, you need to have a minimum 300 words of writing, which is really not much. You need to have 0 spelling and grammar errors. This is important. You need to have at least one good quality photo or visual of some sort. Properly sourced means don't steal it. I will back search and find out if you stole it. So please give me a good quality photo. Either take it yourself, because then you know you own it, or get a good stock photo and make sure that your license is cool. Your post should also have a good sense of focus. So for marking, I just want you to submit me a Word document, a link to your blog post. And below that link, I want you to write in about 150 words, short paragraph, just what it was like to write the post, any difficulties you had, was it easy, was it hard, quick reflection, right? I like using reflections. So, again, word count, need to meet 300 or go above. If you go above, you get more points, as long as it's reasonable. Spelling and grammar, I want none of it. No spelling and grammar errors. I want you to have at least one visual item that adds value to your blog. I want your focus, I want there to be a good focus in your post, and I want the reflection. That's your criteria for marking. Do you have this on Canvas? Feel free to download it. This is worth 25% of your final mark, so it's important. 1 p.m. May 27th. So at the beginning of class next week. That's all I'm going. I'm done with the little lecture. So with that, switch back to Cam. With that, that's about it for today's class. But before we go, just does anyone have any questions about the assignment, about what we learned? Do you want to know anything about photography real quick that you feel would be helpful? We certainly got a group in chat. I'll give it one more minute. Okay, tell you what I'm going to do is I'm going to throw down the cam, like kill my mic and all that. We'll go into the thanks for watching screen. If you do have a question and you're just on a delay, I'm going to keep the thanks for watching running a bit longer than normal. So feel free to ask your question in chat. If you're one of my students, feel free to email me your question. Sounds good? Good. Didn't actually need your validation for that one. Thanks again for watching. Thank you for tuning in. Thank you for joining in for that photo analysis. So, as usual, stay safe, stay informed about what's going on, wash your hands, and practice social distancing. Have a good one, guys.
observe as flames fill the sky. It's just your frame of mind.